So thank you and welcome to Common Time. My name is Crispin Youngberg and I'm the camp registration manager for the Country Dance and Song Society. Our presentation tonight is co-sponsored by the Lavender Country and Folk Dancers, and we are very excited to present a panel discussion on gender-free calling for Contra callers with Ben Sachs-Hamilton, Seth Tepfer, Lindsey Dono, and Mike Karcher, who will be sharing with us their personal experiences around gender-neutral calling in the Contra world. Ben Sachs-Hamilton will be moderating the panel tonight. And Ben is a Contra dance caller and organizer based in Northampton, Massachusetts, with a particular focus on gender-neutral calling and LGBTQ+ dance communities. I'm going to hand over to Ben now and let him introduce the rest of the panel. Thanks very much, Ben.
Thanks, Crispin. It's great to see everyone here. As Crispin said, I'm a caller, dancer, organizer. I've been involved for a long time with LCFD, the Lavender Country and Folk Dancers, and have gotten to work with Mark Gallipo, who I want to particularly thank for making this event happen this evening, along with CDSS. So we have a great group of callers here, and we're going to have a conversation that I think will go in a number of different directions, because there are a lot of different pieces of the art of calling, as well as community building that callers are involved in, and how we can make that more inclusive, more supportive, and safer for everyone who's involved in our dance communities, and how we can use gender neutral calling as one of many tools to do that. So I want to ask our panelists to introduce themselves by way of telling us a little bit about what led them to be interested in gender neutral calling in the first place, why this issue is important to you. So we'll start with Seth Tepfer, who is joining us from Atlanta.
Hi, and I'm delighted to be on this board and panel, and thanks for inviting me here. I've been calling since 1997, so I guess that's 25 years-ish. I call Contras in English and community dance squares. Like others on this panel, I'm a dancer, organizer, and caller. And really my passion is sharing dance with as many different people as possible. The first time I was really exposed to alternate terms was when I got an opportunity, probably 99, maybe 2000, for a local dance group in Atlanta, where I was asked to call bands and bears. And so that was educational for me, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But then really, as I called for family groups and community groups, so many times using gents and ladies is just not helpful. It's counterproductive, especially with middle schoolers who want to dance with their friends. Saying gents and ladies, it just confuses the issue or makes them less likely to dance. I might be calling for a community dance, which is at maybe it's for a kayakers association. So I might call rivers and lakes, or at a different place, I might call leaves and acorns or something like that. You just call what's appropriate right there. And so those were actually my first exposure to using non-gendered terms. And as the discussion ramped up in the Contra community, it was just, I mean, for me, and I know Michael has other things to say about this, which will be great to engage in about, it really is about accessibility and getting the most people involved in dance. And so I'm excited to be moving forward with this.
Thank you, Seth. Let's hear from Lindsey Dono now, who's joining us from the West Coast, from Washington State, Seattle area, I think. How did you get interested in this topic?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks to all of the organizers and attendees. We're really looking forward to all your questions. So please feel free to add your questions to the chat. My name is Lindsey Dono. I've been calling Contras and Plus for perhaps about 10 years now. I'm currently based in the Tacoma, Washington area. I started dancing as a teenager, and there was an immediate dissonance between what I was being told from the stage, everyone can dance with everyone, and then also hearing gendered terms. Particularly as a teenager, it seemed really weird to insert this assumption that, again, I was dancing this sort of courtship element that just didn't necessarily make sense as a teenager who showed up with friends and wanted to initially dance with friends, echoing what Seth said. That dissonance continued as I grew my own dancing career and found myself enjoying dancing on both sides, enjoying dancing with everyone in the room, and also having so many peers who identified as some LGBT characteristic who just felt so excluded by the terminology that all of these things really came together and made me quite passionate about pursuing options that felt more inclusive and that would help grow our community.
Thank you, Lindsey. And let's hear now also from Michael Karcher, who is in the Philadelphia area.
Wonderful. Hello, thanks for having me. So my story, I started dancing more frequently after college in New York, which has a great gender-free Contra dance, and sort of back in the days when there were sort of gender-free dances and more specifically gendered dances. I moved to Seattle and started calling, and my first, not my first full evening gig, but my first time calling a dance in front of paying customers was at the Seattle gender-free dance. And so it was always just sort of a thing that was definitely around. It was definitely like an option, things that people could choose. And then sort of over time there was a sort of like convergence in most of the dance communities I was in, and the sort of separation into gender-free dances and non-gender-free dances kind of disappeared, and we've sort of been integrating the sort of accessibility for everyone into all these different communities. Why it's important to me, I mean, you might accuse me of being open-minded, but early on I sort of didn't get the big deal about gender-free terminology. It's like, oh, they're just parts we play in an act. And then as time went on, just sort of listening to my friends really care about it, just the various heartfelt reasons why they would prefer it, and also sort of growing as a dancer myself and wanting to try different positions, different roles, different ends of the swing, and sort of running into those I mean, you could call them microaggressions, those little moments where you're like, ah, yes, you're the girl, and it's just like, well, not like, let's not have that conversation mid-swing, please. So just sort of having those moments sort of be relieved by having like communities and callers and terminology be mindful of sort of smoothing out those moments and making things like accessible for the folks for whom this is a very, very important like safety issue becomes so very important. And that's sort of where I ended up, of like, this is important to my friends and important to me. And that's sort of where I got to today.
Thanks. So I would love to hear a little bit more. Oh, Seth, you're asking me to introduce myself. I think I did, but hi, everyone. I'm Ben Sachs-Hamilton. I'm a dancer, caller, dance organizer, newly during the pandemic of Northampton, Massachusetts, but I've also danced and called in the Boston and New York City areas, and before that in Vermont. So I'd like to dig a little more into the weeds about your evolution as callers, and particularly with regards to gender neutral calling language, what that journey has been like, what have been some of the stumbling blocks, what's worked well. Michael, maybe we can start right back with you. What's it starting from? Maybe I shouldn't assume, but presumably, I think most of us started from learning how to call with gents and ladies. What did it take to make that transition? What did that look like?
Well, thank you. So I did mostly start learning with gents and ladies, though like very early on, some of my earliest gigs were at a dance that did leads and follows and was very adamant of like, I think they were very, they pronouns for both roles and leads and follows. So sort of from the earliest days of calling, I've had to sort of at least keep multiple role sets in my mind, and on my cards. That's sort of my approach, at least early on, was to have like, all right, have my leads and follows cards and have my gents and ladies cards. And it was definitely interesting sort of tracking those moments of like the desire in the community to sort of replace leads and follows, to have, since Contra doesn't really have much of that dynamic, like to get new terms. And then it was definitely sort of interesting being in kind of the middle of it. Like I think I even contributed to the great spreadsheet war of 2014 or whatever it was, the like supplying candidate terminologies for discussion, and fought with spreadsheets, and thankfully relatively restrained name calling, but it was a challenging time back then. And eventually, I think after quite a lot of discussion and sort of consultations, especially like trying to weigh most heavily like the opinions of the folks for whom this is like most important, sort of coming down on the like Larks and Ravens side, and then having one more iteration of like, I know folks would come to me saying like Raven sounds a lot like rings, and then running into that, but that might have also been my diction. But eventually sort of folks seem to come down to Larks and Robins, and that's sort of where most of the dances will, for me, being a caller, would come down either on the like, you can use gents and ladies, or Larks and Robins, and sort of I think most of my favorite communities now sort of ask the caller what they want to do and have a conversation with them, which I'm appreciative of.
Thanks, Michael. I just want to note that there have been some folks in the chat saying that they were hoping for more of a discussion of positional calling and how that can apply to contra dancing this evening. We probably will touch on that a little bit as, again, a tool that's part of the toolbox of moving away from gender terminology. I think that that's not a particular area of a lot of experience or expertise of this panel. And it would be great, I think, if CDSS wanted to have another conversation down the road that really focused on that. But just to let everyone know, our focus tonight, especially if you're just joining us, is on looking at the bigger picture of what are the alternatives to gendered calling, but also how does this fit into the bigger questions of how we make our dance community safer and more inclusive? And really, from a caller's perspective, what is our role as callers in navigating these conversations and in evolving as callers to best serve the dance communities that we work with? Seth, do you want to talk some about your journey into gender neutral calling? And again, I think because I know I can see we have a lot of callers who are in the audience here. So don't feel like you have to avoid really getting into the weeds of how you do your programming, your dance cards, your teaching. What's that experience been like for you?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so similar to Mike, when I first started, when I first started with bands and bears, I created a whole new set of cards that used bands and bears, and I was practicing calling with those cards to really get it in my head. I think, frankly, bands and bears are harder to remember than Larks and Robins, so it took a fair bit of practice to get that in my head. And also, I was still kind of a brand new caller, just been calling for 2 or 3 years. Um, and it all went great. I had no problems with that until it came time to call a square. I called a square that I was really familiar with, and the walkthrough went well. And then I started doing the patter, and my brain just shut off. And halfway through the square, I realized I'd been using gents and ladies during the patter of the square because I'd been focused on the calling and the direction, and I wasn't even thinking about what was coming out of my mouth. And so that was an educational moment, and still to this day, when I'm calling larks and robins or any other sorts of terms, it's the squares that will trip me up the most. Um, um, I've found that for me, the biggest help for the dancers when I'm using any other terms besides what the community has been doing for the last 20 or 30 years is to just say something that connects with them. So you might say, okay, larks are the ones on the left. For example, I might call larks Alaman left once and a half. And that really, because that's such a common use of what the larks do. So, and this is the walkthrough. I'll say, okay, larks, if you're a lark, I will say larks Alaman left once and a half. And for robins, robins chain. And for me, for many dancers, that seems to like solidify that in their brains. Oh, right, that's the position I'm in. And it helps to connect those terms with the dance roles that they're playing at the time. Um, so anyway, going back to what I was learning as a caller, and I still struggle because in the back of my mind, when I'm thinking lark, part of me that L sound still says lady, and so there's this brief hesitation that I'm still working on too, even though I've been doing this for a while also. Let's see, other things I wanted to think about. I think that's it for now. I'll come back later with more.
Yeah, I definitely resonated with what you said about writing out a whole new set of dance cards. I remember doing some of that. I remember I have at least one card in my collection that has multiple crossouts and new role terms written in tinier and tinier print. And I will say, after a while, I got comfortable enough sort of translating in my head as I went that I just stopped correcting my cards, and my cards now are a mishmash of all different role terms, and it doesn't really matter anymore. I just, whatever it says armbands or it says gents, and I'll call whatever I've been asked to call by whatever group I'm calling for. And sure, I slip up sometimes in multiple different directions, but it happens less and less the more that I do it. Lindsey, I'd love to hear from you on this question too.
Sure. +1, Ben, on the having various sort of card accommodations. Those who've seen my system is I've got this whole color-coded thing with little stickies to swap out various terms. And, like the other callers here, I found that over time I became less reliant on them. And that sort of also sort of spoke to my evolution as a dancer of, I know for lots of us, when we started, we got very used to anchoring on somebody's face. And you've probably heard, look for the place and not the face. And so for me, there was definitely a swap that I had to make both as a dancer and as a caller to shift. And this will get a little bit at that positional element of, rather than looking for somebody who's appears to be of the gender of the role term you're looking for, are you landing in the right place in the room at the right time? Is the person who's approaching you also in sort of in the right place at the right time? And for me, there's this teaching element of encouraging dance skill building that I've found moving away from gender terminology really helps to promote. Coming back to actually learning other terms and other ways to be inclusive, it's not just about the terms, it's about everything you do around that as well. I've seen some callers who very, very, very excitedly signed up for a Larks Robins Contra, and then they still use the pronouns he and she to refer to the roles. So regardless of what terminology you're using, your language around that is also super important. And this is somewhere where I think it might be an interesting contrast between me and Seth of, when I started calling, I was already using gender neutral pronouns on stage. I was already using they. I did not have to make that switch. So I had it significantly easier than a lot of people who are probably in this conversation. But there are so many other elements of both encouraging that, look for the position rather than the face, of what is the language that you're using as a caller that also really contributes to this as well.
So that's a great sort of segue, Lindsey, into thinking about beyond just the terms that we use for different roles. What's the bigger picture of how we do this, how we implement gender neutral dancing as callers? And one place that this comes up really importantly is in teaching new dancers and teaching, new dancers are teaching a beginner lesson, but also just even if you have a more experienced group, how you sort of set the stage for the evening at the very beginning, how you ask people to line up, all of those sort of setting the groundwork before you even start teaching a dance. How does that work differently, or how have you seen or experienced that working differently when in a gender neutral dance environment? Michael, do you want to start with this one?
Let's see. So for that beginner lesson, I do try to make sure that they're getting a lot of sort of practice in their bodies, and that's kind of what the beginner lesson is for: getting them moving, getting them used to responding to instructions. I think I do try to emphasize that these are roles we play, sort of no matter what the terminology for the evening is, sort of leaning on like these are roles we play. I think similarly making sure like that not to lean on pronouns extra hard, but I do think Lindsey's point about sort of being consistent, even on evenings where you might be using like gents and ladies terms, like if we are being honest about like these are roles that anyone can play, then it's important to sort of be consistent in that choice. I'm definitely also looking forward to seeing how my colleagues do their sort of introductory lessons, because that is sort of the things I took from my early lessons as a caller, of like trying to communicate as fast as possible and reliably as possible, like who's doing what are they doing, and like how far. So getting that sort of motion into their body as early as possible, of like, all right, what do you respond to, which moves are directed at you, is one where I think like it's definitely best to have that introductory lesson, but I'm really curious how other folks sort of make it reliable and fast.
Lindsey, I know you have some thoughts about this from our earlier conversation.
Sure. So I start by thinking of the goals of the community and trying to best serve the goals of the community. And that can mean different things in different places. And if there's an online callers forum called Shared Weight, and there are tens and tens and tens of pages of notes about, well, do you teach one role or both roles in a beginner session? And how do you, in a gender neutral setting, how do you have somebody pick one role or the other? Should they pick one role or the other? Should you have everybody be ambidextrous? How do you do this? I take a step backwards, and who is my community? And there are lots of questions that go into this. First of all, is this a relatively experienced dance group with an introduction session that's only the beginners are going to show up and none of the experienced dancers are at? Is this like a one-off dance for, one of, Seth's kayaking community? Is this a group I've called at women's retreats? Like who is this group and what are they looking for? And I try to, as much as possible, calibrate my intro session towards what I think, first of all, where the community is, and then what are my goals and what are the organizers' goals for what the community wants to go. And obviously, dancers and organizers and callers can all have a slightly different objective in mind, but rolling these together it's a mostly experienced group. I see an opportunity to encourage people to try dancing a role that they're less comfortable with, not only to grow their own skills, but to create a more friendly community. If everybody can dance with everybody, nobody has to sit out, for example. Or is this just a one-night stand group where we may or may not even have sided dancing? Do I even need to introduce any sides at all? So rather than trying to dodge the question, I would just reframe it as, what are the goals of the community?
Thank you. So I think in a way, this question of the setup and the beginner lesson, if there is one, sort of highlights one of the ways that callers can set the tone for an evening. Because it is, on the one hand, as callers, we are we're there to teach dances, and each dance community has its own norms and its own tone, and we adjust ourselves to that. And on the other hand, we bring our own style, we bring our own opinions and techniques. I'd love to hear from you, maybe we can start with you, Seth, about where you see the role of the caller in the dance community in this way. And I guess this even goes beyond gender neutral calling, though I think the connection is pretty clear.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I think that's a great question, because and so many of the audience are callers. As callers, we affect the community both on and off the podium, and we are community role models and leaders. So certainly on the podium, you're setting a tone, and each caller has their own style, but I feel like I approach it as, hey, we're going to try something different, and we're going to play with this and see what it's like, and be willing to make mistakes, and allowing people the opportunity to make mistakes without losing face, I think is critical. Um, and I tend to make a lot of mistakes when I'm calling, and I acknowledge it, I laugh about it, and then I move on. I don't dwell on it. And I've had conversations with friends and mentors, and they say, it's actually great that you make mistakes, because you're role modeling how you want the dancers to make mistakes. We want the dancers, the only way you learn is by making mistakes. And this is all about learning a new way, learning new language, right? We're talking about changing the language that people are used to and giving them new language. And to learn something new, you have to be willing to make mistakes. So we want the dancers to be free to make mistakes and free to laugh about it, and then move on and acknowledge it. So that is something that we can do as community leaders and community role models, both while we're on the podium and also as dancers. And I think about all the other ways that we can affect the community when we're dancing, because other people are watching what we do. Sometimes we are the nearest of authority about dance when we're in a hands for or something, and people might ask me something. And of course, I'm trying to role model paying attention to the caller and listen to the caller, and or as when the dance is done, I'll go and ask a new dancer to dance, or I might ask someone who presents as the same dance role as me, as a and we're someone I like to dance with, someone I enjoy dancing with. I'm not just doing this because I'm trying to be a role model, but people are watching what you do. And if you say it's okay to dance with people with the same role, that's part of what this dance is about, then other people will see that as well. So, role modeling, being willing to make mistakes and laugh about it and still have fun. I think those are two of the big things we do as callers.
What I'm curious what any of the three of you think is the role of the caller, specifically when it comes to dance role terms. Do you, when you're getting hired for a gig, do you just say, what terms do you use? Great, okay, I'll use those. Do you ever try to push in any particular direction, or have you ever been asked what you would prefer to do?
All right, we'll jump in. All of the above. I've been, and I think this is probably true for the other panelists as well, is we've been in situations where this is the way the community goes. We've been in situations where we've had the opportunity to influence, and we've been in situations where we've been given a choice. And it is both empowering and frustrating to be given the choice, because what it does is it changes where the finger of blame gets pointed. And sometimes well-meaning organizers end up putting the blame on. And again, this can go in so many different directions of, if somebody's unhappy with the choice, do you blame the caller? Do you blame the organizer? Do you blame the dancers? Hopefully there isn't blame going around, but it can be a fairly awkward situation of deciding how much do you want to stick with the status quo versus how much do you want to encourage a group to build community, try new things, explore, develop their own skills. And so it can be fairly awkward. And I've had some really intense conversations when, with other callers, some of whom are on this chat, when I've been given the option. And I certainly have my own personal preference, but I want to be asked back to this community. I want to make the dancers happy. However, we have a group of people that's been historically really oppressed. How do I put those things together? So something that's been, I think, helpful in my own decision making is, I think, just evolving my own sense of, what feels like the right thing to do. And that has definitely changed over the last 5 years of it, when it went from, anything other than gents and ladies is really out there and, we're never going to consider it, to being able to say, oh, well, I come from a community that uses non-gendered language, and hey, guess what? It really didn't impact anybody's experience. And oh, by the way, we have a lot more kids, young adults, members of the queer community who are now coming to our dance. So I'll let somebody else jump in.
I think some hopefully small thoughts. I think I come down on appreciating the organizers getting my opinion. I think to me that is a little bit easier. I think I perhaps lack the principled fortitude of trying to shift a dance that is set in their ways to a different way. But if they're willing to let me sort of do my show with the terms I like, then they can I can claim to show them a good time, but that might just be hubris. But I think one thought about the role of the caller in this in my mind, what came to mind was that we are somewhat of the canary in the mine. Like, even if we're on the stage, if we're off the stage, like if we're on the stage, we can see if the dance is holding together with the terms we're using. But even if we're off the stage, and sometimes if we're on the stage, people will talk to callers. Like, if there was any sort of like, man, that was confusing. Believe me, if you've called a dance, dancers will tell you, even if you're not the one who's called it. Like at the bar afterwards, on the dance floor, it's and callers who are on stage, don't worry about this. We're not talking about you behind your back, but like, it is definitely one of those moments of like, ah, yes, they did like this, they didn't like this, this was confusing, this was so much more, like that moment of like, ah, that felt a whole lot better. In my mind, we get an earful of it in all sorts of like reaffirming and concerning ways. So I feel like as some way we are in some ways the like earpiece of we will hear about it in all the different ways.
Yeah, I so agree, Mike. Whether it's I didn't use the G word and I used right shoulder round, and people will shout out at me, no, the word you meant was like, yeah, I know what I meant. Or I get booed for calling squares, or I mean, whatever it is, there will be people who are dissatisfied with your programming. Oh, there were too many easy dances, or there were too many chestnuts. And you called Money Musk. How dare you? Or why didn't you call Money Musk? It's March, So there's so many different dimensions where people can give feedback. It's sort of the gig of the callers to be up front and to take all that. And if the organizers, we're working with the organizers, and the organizer is our liaison for the community. And so if the organizer says, hey, we're going to try doing this, and we want you to be the scapegoat, guinea pig for calling this new term on the community, then, okay, let's do it. Or if I'm not feeling brave enough, then I'll say, no, I'm not going to do that tonight. At this point, of course, it's sure, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And I know I said this before, but approaching it that, hey, I'll make mistakes, you'll make mistakes, and we're going to have fun with this. Ultimately, we're here to dance, we're here to have fun. These are just words, just to get us moving. And then once we're moving to the music, we're in a different place. And I do want to just cover myself a little bit, or at least out myself. I'm definitely one of those who early on, I was like, oh, yes, Larks, Alaman left once and a half, and now go to your partner and swing her. And so I think it was actually Lindsey who came up to me and said, even though you're using Larks and Robins, you're still using she and he and her and him. And so that was definitely a paradigm shift for me. It should have, in retrospect, it was obvious. But so, yeah, being willing to admit when you're making mistakes and smile and try something different.
One thing that I think I'm hearing in a little bit in between the lines of what all three of you said in this area is that no matter what the answer is, having an organizing committee or whoever's putting on the dance, having thought about this at all and being willing to talk about it and communicate with the caller makes a huge difference. So I think, as you said, Seth, as callers, dancers do not hold back in sharing their questions, concerns, complaints, which is, I think, part of what makes this community what it is. I think anyone who's used gender neutral calling has heard some of the different arguments that people use to challenge or push back against that. I'm curious, what are some of the arguments that you've heard that you find the most convincing or sympathize the most with? And how have you responded to that? Seth, do you want to maybe start us off on this one?
Yeah, and I had made some notes about this, but now I'm thinking about my notes and realizing they don't really answer your question as stated, but I'm going to forge ahead blindly anyway. Yeah, some of the questions, I can't remember if I'm a lark or a robin or a raven, and what do these words even mean? Or a favorite one is larks seem they're so feminine to me, and I don't want to be feminine. Um, and I mean, a little bit uh, my my career origins as a computer programmer, I have a lot of training in variables, and you have a variable name and it has a value. And ultimately, I don't care what the variable name is, it's just what the value is that matters to me. And so I bring that approach to calling. It's like, okay, lark, oak, acorn, gent, boy, these are all just variable names. And what matters is I'm alimenting left once and a half. But I realize not everyone in the world is a computer programmer. So, and I actually do appreciate that. So, um, I also know that it's not just getting through the walkthrough, but these are words that we're using to help people learn the dance and get it into their body memory. When I was a brand new caller, I got opportunity to hear George Marshall do his new callers lesson, actually several times in a single year. And he talked about an experiment he did where he called the dance twice through, and then after the second time through, instead of actually calling, he just said blah 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 blah, and when he would normally actually use calling words. And that really stuck with me. And I tried sort of not exactly that experiment, but ultimately I realized that after one or two times through, the dancers are really not listening to the words that we're using. They're listening to the moments when words come out and prompt us to start moving. And that really brings home that after a certain point, it doesn't matter what we're saying, right? So the words really only matter just as a way of getting people to the right place. And so one word is a lark, another word is the people on the left, allemande left once and a half until you get to your partner and swing your partner. It's really about how can we get people there the easiest way. Um, um, and just one other quick anecdote, and I'll let other people talk. I had the opportunity at Cascade Contra's weekend a few years ago where we tried lots of different role names. And in fact, we had a poster and people would just write down whatever role pairs they wanted. And we had like one role pair was supercalifragilistic and expialidocious. And so each dance during the afternoon workshop, I was using a different pair of role terms. And every single time I just introduced it. Okay, folks, supercalifragilistic, allemande left once and a half. And expialidocious, chain across. And that was really all it took was a moment where people could translate this word, this alien word, into what it has meaning behind the scenes. Okay, this is what I used to mean as a gent, or this is the role I'm currently playing. And when he says supercalifragilistic, I'm an allemande left once and a half. And I mean, the terms were silly and strange, but the point was they were just words. And I watched. I mean, these were dancers at a dance weekend, so it was kind of a rarefied situation, and they're all swapping left and right anyway. But even beyond that, they were able to translate when it was presented in a way that, hey, this is something we're playing with, and they didn't mind learning new terms. So much of it is setting it up before you even start calling, and setting up people with the attitude that this is something where we're doing together.
Thank you. I liked the way that Sarah put this in the comments. The argument I hear most is we've been doing it this way for so long with no issue. Why make an issue of it now? I come to relax, and learning new terms is stressful, not relaxing for me. I think we've all probably heard some version of that, and it's certainly something that I can sympathize with. I'm curious how any of you would respond to that.
I'm curious if that same dancer would react similarly if we said, oh, we've got a new piece of choreography that Seth just wrote, and I really want to call it for you. And nobody's ever danced this dance before, but we think it works. Is that still okay? So I think I would say, okay, let's take a big step back here. And as Seth just pointed out, this is one of so many pieces of what makes a dance together. However, we're in this position where we want to be as empathetic as possible and certainly not dismiss a concern. And this is a great opportunity to use, what we always hear in improv training, yes, and. Yes, it has been working for you for this period of time, and there are dancers who have been excluded.
Yeah, I think I really like the way you put that, the yes and. Seth.
Also, in addition to what Lindsey was saying, sometimes people just need to be heard and they want to say they're uncomfortable, and it may sound like a complaint. It may sound like they're really unhappy and they don't like the change, but really they just want to voice their discomfort, and then they're ready to try it.
So a little side note, a lot of people, especially in the chat, have been talking about positional calling, and I know that's a hot topic right now. Another sort of version of gender neutral calling and dancing that sometimes comes up is dances that have no distinguishable roles. Sometimes I've gone to a couple of sessions at dance festivals that are advertised as gender-free dancing, and what they meant by that was not that we're replacing the role terms, but that we're actually going to do dances where it doesn't matter. Those tend to be simpler, more sort of beginner level dances, though not always. Are there circumstances where those sorts of dances feel appropriate or helpful to you?
I'll take a brief jump in. I feel like the actual role-less dancing had sort of a moment, or is having a moment that sort of got spread out across the sort of pandemic virtual times. I feel like it found a really good solid home among the sort of virtual dances, the singlets, the doublets, etc. I feel like I have a number of my favorite virtual format dances like don't actually have roles. I mean, the closest thing to a role is like, all right, now the left person rolls the right person away. It's like you could attach a role to that if you manually was like, all right, Lark does this. But like for the most part, it's like if you do two of them in a row, it's like, well, the left person spins the right person away. Now the left person spins the right person away. So I feel like it's been a wonderfully fruitful environment for that over the last couple years, especially in these environments where like you may not have a in-person partner, or you may not have an in-person neighbor. It's been great for that. And this is one of those ones where I'll defer on not having a ton of experience dancing positional calling due to the last couple years, but I'm super interested to see how folks work out the positional technology for like intricate dances. I'm looking forward to see what people come up with.
So I'll jump in a little bit about positional. One of the last times I got to call our local dance before the pandemic shut it down, I did an evening of positional calling. And as people who call positional or dance positional knows, if you don't say anything about it, people don't even notice. And that's one of the slick things about Flick has too many negative connotations. It's just amazing to me that you can call an evening with positional, and it is definitely sidestepping this whole Larks, gents. There's no role names at all. When I've done it, it certainly requires more preparation and thinking about your cards and thinking about how you're going to teach the dance. But once you've gone through that and once you've practiced it, it really feels it's smooth. It makes me a better caller and better teacher, better walkthroughs, and it makes the dancers better dancers. As we have a list, a database, a spreadsheet online on a Google sheet that lists a fair number of dances. I don't know, 100 or so, and whether they require no role names or just like one role name, like an Alaman left once and a half or a chain, or multiple role names. And it's fairly easy to design a whole program, a Contra program, where you can do positional um, with variety, and no concern about role names at all. And it's not just easy dances. There's some on there that are pretty complex, that have, let's see, Chinese New Year by Chris Page. I'm just glancing over it. Easy for You to Say by Dean Snipes. There are a bunch of others. It's not really about the complexity. It's about how can you easily describe where people are at that moment and who needs to do the next move. Um, so the positional is really, your original question was, when is a positional a good time to, when is a good place to use positional? And I'm really looking forward to more opportunities to call in person to live dancers in front of me as opposed to across the Zoom screen. They're still live, they're just across the Zoom screen. And getting to call contras that progress and such like that. A number of the comments have been talking about Brooke Friendly and her ECD, and it is true, ECD seems a lot easier for global positional calling. Um, Certainly, ECD dancers are more used to first corners, um, second corners, which you can use to identify a role or a position. And contra dancers don't have that as much. I know Beth Malaro has done some work with positional calling, and she uses the person whose left hand is open or available or something like that. I'm personally still looking for an easy way to do those element lefts or those chains without without identifying a role. And so, still, it's a journey, but you can do some very creative programs positional only.
Thank you. So again, we can continue to talk more about the details of gender neutral calling and role terminology and what language we do or don't use. But I do want to take a few minutes to zoom out and think about the broader context of inclusion and safety. And what are some of the ways that you as callers feel are particularly important or have seen success with in making our dance communities safer and more inclusive, regardless of the role terms that we're using? Are there ways, let's say you get hired for a dance and they say that our community uses gents and ladies, this is not up for debate. Are there other ways that you bring a similar sense of trying to promote greater inclusion and safety?
I'm going to snag something that I picked up from Lisa Greenleaf, which is I statements and modeling those. And there's definitely safety in numbers of that. Here's an example of, there was a dancer in my community who, whenever I went to swing with them, their hand would be too low on my back. And it was not only physically uncomfortable, but it also felt emotionally uncomfortable. And I had been kind of struggling to say anything to this person for a while, and attended Lisa's session, and I went, you know what, I'm now empowered. I'm going to go say something. I'm going to practice what I teach here. And I went to this dancer and I said something, and they said, oh, I didn't know that. Thank you for telling me. And I felt like I had done the community a great service. Then the next time I encountered this person in line as a neighbor and went to swing them, they said, oh, I'm going to put my hand high for you because I know you like that. And it was this great moment of, it's going to be the whole community that needs to tell this one dancer about this one particular quirk that isn't working. And it's so hard to be the only voice. And in that moment, even when I felt personally empowered to be that one voice, the dancer needed to hear it from more than one person. And so while we as callers can model what we want to see on the floor, and we should be modeling what we want to see on the floor, how do we help everyone feel comfortable, both of all speaking up for themselves and feeling safe to do that? And this is where our organizer friends can really help us out, is first of all, by promoting that. And second of all, by making sure that dancers feel like they have a safe space to talk about things. And there can definitely be situations where it's so easy to say, oh, nobody else has had a problem with this dancer, or I don't want to go too far down this path, but there's definitely safety in numbers, and everybody should feel comfortable speaking up or speaking to somebody about what's going on. And even if it feels like it's something that's sub-threshold or minor, always get that gut check. I mean, if you're experiencing it, there's a reasonable chance somebody else is as well.
Definitely. Seth or Michael, do you want to chime in?
I think mostly to echo that. I think that's an extremely important point from Lindsey there, and I think that's probably the lowest hanging fruit for making our communities safer and more inclusive. I think to a large extent organizers don't realize how many folks have one of those experiences, not necessarily like his hand was too low, but things that just cause them to not come back. And often if you're like priding yourself as an organizer, listening to your community, I think it's important to be mindful that you're listening to the community that's stuck around. And that is sort of passing through the filter of someone who's been like, I mean, I can use the idea of like they're scared off, but not even necessarily that strong. But if like they've had odd experiences or unsafe experiences enough to just make the activation energy of going to the dance too high, you might never hear from them again. And so that isn't like informing your organizers sort of what is going on in your community. So I think just being mindful that like the status quo, if you're listening, as hard as you're still listening to the status quo.
Thanks, Michael. I think that's a really important point to remember, is that the who is in the room has already been shaped by the decisions that callers and dancers and organizers have made in the past. And we need to be thinking not just about who is in the room, but also who isn't. Either because they have both in terms of those who haven't come and will in the future, and those who have come and felt uncomfortable and left and gone away and felt unwelcome. Seth, I know you had some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I a lot of it I'd said earlier. I think being a role model is critical. It's hard to role model those dancing behaviors when you're calling, but certainly you can while you're waltzing, if you're waltzing during the break. I know a lot of communities have started posting signs either in bathrooms around the walls, encouraging the kind of behaviors they're looking to encourage. And as callers, I'd only do this once in a night, but you can also do things like trios where no matter how you do it, with a trio with three people, you know, two people are going to be the same presenting role. And I mean, trios kind of just eliminate roles altogether. And so adding, I mean, you don't want many dances are very strongly contracentric. So you're probably not going to have much leeway in your program for novelty dances like that. But every little bit makes a difference in breaking up this. Oh, it must be duple minor, it must be contra, 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 and it must be these roles that we have sort of defined. And contra has this roles built in that it's, I mean, we're struggling with when we talk about positional because it's like, okay, we have these people do the Alaman left once and a half, these people do the chain, and we're struggling with how do we get people to leave those roles and dance any role. You can dance any side, but it is built into the dance, and it's that we're that's the tension we're struggling with there.
I'm curious, we didn't really talk about this during our planning conversations, but what we've been talking about this evening has made me think about how to, that there's probably different ways to talk about gender neutral dancing to people who are new and you're teaching them from scratch versus people who are very used to, let's say, dancing with as gents and ladies. I feel like we tend to focus on one or the other. What do you see? Is there a way in one evening even to try to reach both of those groups in a way that will be accessible to them? Or how would you differentiate your messaging or your teaching?
I'm actually going to steal some of the things that were said, thought later. In, um, encouraging people to be patient with each other. It's part, but I mean, I'm not going to say as a caller, I'm not going to get on the podium and say, okay, let's be patient with each other. Let's be gentle. Let's be kind. Let's be compassionate. Let's, I might do something in a workshop space or in again, a novelty kind of space where let's try dancing the other role sort of situation. Though that seems a little old fashioned. It was exciting in the 90s and the aughts, but nowadays it's kind of old hat. But what what are you exuding as a caller? What kind of attitude are you putting out there? Are you encouraging people by the way you talk about them to be compassionate with each other? I know um, when someone makes a mistake, are you calling that person out by name, or are you just saying, are you rather than having everyone point out that one particular person, are you talking about this is the way we want to do it, and here is an opportunity, here is the way not to do it. Remember, pointing out the positive way first and not mentioning any names. There are thousands of different ways as callers we either are judgmental and critical or we're generous and compassionate and empathetic. And I think that energy that we put out encourages people to be playful, encourages them to be gentle and compassionate, or encourages them to be critical, judgmental, and rigid. And I think that is 90% of what our job is.
Plus one to that. And also, rather than separating people out into groups, put everyone on the same side, make everybody teammates. And Seth, I may have gotten this from you, like maybe it was you or Will Mentor. okay, for this next dance, we're going to go on an adventure. Who's with me? And of course, everybody's with you. And so just taking away that barrier of we're going to do this thing and some people don't like it, and you're going to have to end the swing on the opposite side. And it bring everyone over into your camp. This is a community sport, even if you are, whatever your reason for being in that room is, it's a community activity and you can't do it without other humans. So I would just say, let's take that divide out, bring everybody on your side. We're going to do something. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. It's totally weird. I get it. I'm with you. We're on this adventure together.
Yeah, definitely +1 to the idea of that going on an adventure. I think that does remind me of the notion of like we all try as callers to do our best to make the beginners feel like they're super experienced, that they know exactly what they're doing, and it doesn't always work. But I feel like there's the other side of the coin, which is making experienced people feel new, and that you can take that as like, oh, they don't feel like they know what they're doing, but that notion of like, this is a challenge. This is something where I don't like know 5 seconds ahead what the caller is going to do next. Is for me, that's a valuable thing as an experienced dancer, knowing, like, reminding myself what it feels like when it's fresh. And I feel like part of that is in the framing of like, all right, now here's a challenging one. Like, you might want to sit this out versus like you say, let's go on an adventure. Like, who's with me? So I think there's lots of good opportunities for things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I thinking about, as with my dancer hat on, right? There are times when I enjoy being on autopilot and I can just really focus on listening to the music, and I'm not really paying that much attention to the color because it's a dance I've done 100 times and I don't really need to. And there are times when I want to be engaged and I want to be using that other part of my brain. And so inviting people to, like you said, to join you in that way seems great. I want to make sure that we have some time for our many attendees. We have a great turnout tonight to ask questions of the panelists, but I do have one last question before we do that, which is, most of us have not been dancing in person for 2 years, something like that now. Time doesn't really exist anymore, but I do feel like there are ways in which this forced break from in-person dancing presents an opportunity, or can present an opportunity, to make some structural changes to how we call, to how we organize dances, to how we structure our dancing and our dance communities. What are some ways that you would like to see us as callers, as organizers, taking advantage of that opportunity, particularly when it comes to gender neutral dancing and more inclusive dancing in general?
Well,
Lindsey,
certainly.
Seth, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'll be brief and give Lindsey time to gather her thoughts. While everyone's going to be rusty coming back, and so this is like your catch-all. You can get away with anything, right? It's like, oh, okay, I haven't done this for a while, so just be patient with me while I try this thing, and whatever this thing is, but you can throw lots of things in that basket. Is a great opportunity, and also. We know historically after the 1918 pandemic, there was a big resurgence and interest in dance. So there's going to be some fabulous opportunities with lots of people who are craving the validity of touch and craving a low tech, low fi kind of experience. Contra dance is just poised to be exactly the experience people want. Connecting as a community, this touch and dancing, moving to music. So as dances start opening up, once things get going again, I predict you will be seeing a lot of new dancers, and having all these new dancers, likely younger dancers, coming in is a great opportunity to, it's new to them, it's new to you, everyone, it's all new to everyone. So everyone try it. It's a safe space. Okay. Lindsay.
Michael, I see your hand. Do you want to jump in?
Just want sort of a hopefully a quick idea of like I think I agree that this is a moment to try things. Like I see a lot of folks showing interest in chat in the positional calling. Like this is a time for adventures, but I also think it's an opportunity for organizers to make like mindful decisions. Like we will, like Seth says, we'll probably be seeing a lot of new dancers. It may be good to have already thought out the sort of workflow for like how do you approach especially a new dancer who you don't know, who felt uncomfortable or things along those lines. How do you make your dances safe for an influx of new dancers who don't know anything about like Contra culture and things like that? Mindful, like your community might want to stick with gendered calling, but like it's an opportunity to make a mindful choice. Speak to your community and see what people actually are interested in. I think that's it for me.
So as a caller, I'm challenging myself, and I welcome all you callers to join me in this challenge of what pieces in our teaching and in our onboarding should we rethink. I know that I've certainly fallen into, as I've going from gig to gig to gig, of you learn how you teach a thing, and it's just that's in the back of your mind, and whenever you need to explain how a chain works, the same words come out each time. Just as everybody is going to be sort of re-onboarding to just what this whole experience is, what are some things that we can rethink as callers? Not just from, can we make it easier for dancers, but also can we make it more inclusive? And here I'd like to point to, we have there's some awesome Contra choreographies that are often taught with a very particular story to them. And I'll give an example, Ramsey Chase by Joseph Pimentel. It's usually taught as, this roll goes over here and then this other roll comes back and then they chase them across the set. And it's always taught in this same way. How else might we communicate where you should positionally be in your hands for without going into this chase flirty mindset? Like, is there another way that this dance could be danced? And can we as callers think a little bit more broadly about, do we have to keep using this same language over again? Or are there opportunities for us to, first of all, explore some other ways of explaining things, and also just even take the same choreography and make it a little bit less structured?
Thanks, Lindsay. Something I'm also thinking of, again, this is mostly focusing on calling, but many of us wear many hats, including dance organizing. And I know LCFD has worked on developing and implementing a new code of conduct during this time. And I would be surprised if other communities weren't also doing the same. This is a good time to take advantage of the fact that we're not hiring bands and callers and negotiating with venues and planning in-person events to take some of that work that takes time and effort, but can really pay off. So I would love to, there's been some great chat, and we can certainly draw on that, but if any of you have specific questions for our panel, either specific individuals or just that you would love to hear their thoughts on, I want to invite you to put those into the chat, and we have a few minutes to do that.
While those questions are coming in, I remember going to a Callers Week with Bob Dulcimer, and he was talking about, at that point, the G word, and how it didn't have to be flirty. And he talked about, I mean, obviously, you're dancing with someone who's 8 years old, and of course, it's not an opportunity for flirty. And he talked about doing different things with your hands and being silly, but the idea that there are a lot of different ways to interpret the different moves, like the chase or the right shoulder around, um, has been around for a while, and it's just some people like holding on to those storylines, and some people realize, oh, we don't have to. We can let people build their own storylines. People who come with a certain mindset in mind are going to have that mindset whether we give them the story or not. So we don't need to be there to set that up for them. They will have that whether they want it or not. Yeah.
And specifically, something that I certainly do is think about what is it when we talk about that flirty quality of, let's say, a Mad Robin or something, what is it that we really mean? And if I suggest that this is an opportunity for playful eye contact, can we get to the same place of enjoying that point of connection without pressuring people to make it something that may be uncomfortable for them if we call it flirtation? Penn brought up something interesting in the chat here about whether dancing has become complicated to the point of becoming inaccessible. And I think that's an interesting idea, in that there is a way in which there's almost a tension between gender neutral calling as a type of promoting a type of dance that can be more accessible, because especially if you're doing the kind of dance where the roles are irrelevant, and if it's a simpler dance, if it's a more accessible dance. At the same time, I think we don't want to imply that gender neutral dancing is always or is necessarily simpler or less complex, that you couldn't have an advanced or experienced contra dance that was all using gender neutral calling. What do you think about that? Does gender neutral calling feel more cut out to you for one or the other of those purposes?
So if I could wave my magic wand and instill one skill on every single contra dancer, it would be resiliency or adaptability. And for that, I think gender neutral calling is a way forward for all of those groups to build their own dance skills, to take themselves less seriously, to look for the place and not the face, whatever terminology you want to use. I mean, I think that there is an opportunity for all of these groups. And I know that there is definitely dissonance between, who are we calling for? Are we calling for, are we trying to onboard new people? Are we trying to keep the experienced dancers, on the edge of their toes with the hottest new Chris Page choreography? Like, what are we trying to do here? That dissonance, I think you can start to address by, I think, just having mixed programming.
Looking in the, it was a good question here. So I was having to scroll back because so many people are speaking up. Franny was asking, how do you begin to integrate gender-free dancing and calling in a community that is extremely traditionally based? What would your first small steps be?
I know I would certainly, if there were something I used to do in the aughts and in the 90s would be to say, okay, for this one dance, I'm going to ask that I encourage you to dance the other role, to switch sides. Everyone just switch with their partner. That was something I used to do a fair bit. And it sets, since everybody's doing it, it's more acceptable. And I'll introduce it. I like everyone to, I think everyone is a better dancer when they are aware of all the different roles in the room. So if you're a sound person, it makes you a better dancer. If you're a caller, it makes you a better dancer. If you're a musician, it makes you a better dancer. And if you're dancing in your partner's role, it makes you a better dancer. So setting it up, and when everyone does it, there's some peer encouragement to do it. So that gets everyone to try something different and break some of the habits. Trying to think of other techniques I've used besides that, and trios off the top of my head. But again, role modeling also.
I think even the small, somewhat invisible things like one thing that would come to mind for me would be like, even if using gents and ladies, like using they, because leaning on the idea that anyone could be any of those roles and you don't know who's where. And I think one thing that comes to mind would be like laying some of the groundwork, not even like conceptually, but vocabulary wise. Like there are totally interesting dances that would have a like left hand chain, and it's like once you have that, then people feel a little bit more confident, like, oh, if I were on the right side, I could do a right hand chain or things along those lines. You might also find that people are like, I've never done this from either side, I don't know what I'm doing. And that's part of the like, frame it as an adventure, and where like nominal failure is fun. If you can get that into a community, then everything else flows a lot smoother.
Yeah, lots of choreography hacks that, and obviously you have to use these with some amount of reserve, but do the Larks do a right hand chain? Do you have a same roll swing? If you do, how do you teach that? And rather than just sort of throwing people at it and say, okay, two Robins swing in the center. Okay, two Robins approach each other in the center, barrel hold, both hands out symmetrically. And there are opportunities and there are lots of choreography where you're actually interacting more with the same dance role neighbors than you are with either your opposite dance role neighbors or even with your partner. So looking for that choreography that will start subtly expanding who you're dancing with and how you're dancing in a way that doesn't feel invasive, because people really don't want to feel uncomfortable. And I've certainly made this mistake of, I was in a very gendered community and I thought, oh, I'll expand everybody's horizons. I'll do a no walkthrough. And I called a Larks swing in the center, and oh boy, that did not work out. So being mindful, first of all, of how you introduce something, and then taking the time to actually explain how to do it in a way that makes everybody feel more comfortable giving it a try.
Yeah, in addition to all the same roll swings, there are plenty of chestnuts and other dances that have same roll right and left through, for example. So people get to practice being on either side of that courtesy turn, which one side they might have associated only with one particular role. So
calling proper dances. There we go.
All right, well, we are just about to wrap up. So I just want to give the three of you a chance. If there's one thing that you would like our attendees tonight to take away from this conversation, what would it be? And Seth, let's start with you.
my mantra as a caller: emanate playfulness and emanate joy.
Michael?
I think the thing that comes to my mind is just like, be mindful in your choices. Like make your choices, but like think about them. Think about who they affect, what kind of community you're building.
And Lindsey?
So I'm actually going to use a quote. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Ask everyone to dance.
Thank you. And thank you very much. Seth, Michael, Lindsey, thank you to everyone who joined in the conversation in the chat, asking questions, engaging with each other. This has been a great evening. I'm going to hand it back over to Crispin for a few last housekeeping announcements and reminders.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you to all of our panel, Seth, Lindsey, and Michael, for such an engaging and insightful conversation. We know that this is an ongoing topic of discussion in many dance communities right now, and at CDSS, we hope we will be able to continue to provide resources, events, places for discussion, and perhaps that could include more detail on positional calling and Contra. So thank you for letting us know that you're interested in that out there. We will see if we can make that happen. We are delighted to be able to present this program to you free of charge. But if you find it interesting, we do ask that you consider making a donation to support our work and support future events like this. I'm going to put a link in the chat that will enable you to do that. I just have a couple of announcements about other upcoming CDSS events. So firstly, Common Time is a monthly series. So there is a March Common Time, and that's another panel discussion based around our Contra podcast, which Julie Valamont will be hosting. That's on Monday, the 21st of March. And coming up sooner this week, we have the third and final session of David Milston's Square Dance History series this Thursday. You can come to the third one if you haven't come to 1 and 2. The recordings are available if you want to catch up on the first one, or if you just want to sign up for the third one, it will stand on its own. And then next Monday, we have our web chat for dance organizers, which is focused on dance groups who have been working on restarting in-person events in the last couple of months. So there'll be people presenting examples from their community about what precautions they've been taking and how they've been managing that. And looking a little bit further ahead, registration is open for our summer camp programs. So we have CDSS, I won't give you the full rundown, but we have 9 different summer camp programs from June through August in 4 different states, and we hope there is something there for you. So more information about all of these things on our website, camp.cdss.org. And again, thank you so much all for coming tonight, and thank you to our wonderful panel, Ben, Seth, Lindsey, and Michael. Thanks very much, everyone. That's it for tonight.